Have you ever seen someone get destroyed for thinking they could humiliate the wrong person? At Lincoln High School, a popular girl named Madison Hayes thought she could do exactly that. She walked up to Keisha Brown, a quiet black girl who had just transferred in, grabbed a pair of scissors, and cut off her braided hair right in front of everyone. The whole class laughed. The teacher looked away. Madison thought Keisha would cry and run out of the room. She was dead wrong. Before we dive in, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your city and country in the comments. Hit that like button to help spread this message, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. So what happened the moment those scissors touched Keisha's hair? Let's go back to the very beginning. The sky was bright blue that morning. Big houses lined the streets, each one looking perfect with white fences and shiny new cars in every driveway. This neighborhood looked like a picture from a magazine. But Keisha Brown knew that picture wasn't meant for girls like her. She sat quietly in the back of her mom's old car, staring out the window. House after house passed by, all looking the same, all looking too clean to be real. Her mother, Carol Brown, drove without saying much. Ever since Keisha's dad left, silence had become normal in their house. Silent dinners, eyes that never met, doors closing instead of conversations happening. Near the school gate hung a big banner that read, "Excellence through Community." Keisha frowned at those words. She gripped her backpack strap tight, her hand shaking just a little. Community? What community ever stood up for her when boys in her old neighborhood pushed her around just because she wouldn't smile at them? What community protected her when her best friend moved away without even saying goodbye? Her mom fixed the rear-view mirror and checked her makeup quickly. "You'll be fine," she whispered. No hug, no have a good day. That was it. Her fingers tapped the steering wheel. Her mind was already somewhere else thinking about errands. Keisha opened the car door and stepped out. The door closed softly, leaving her alone as hundreds of students walked past her toward Lincoln High. Everyone was laughing. Phones were out. Expensive bags swung from shoulders. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they belonged, like they'd practiced this moment 1,000 times. Keisha took a deep breath, lifted her chin, and walked straight through those doors. The first thing she noticed wasn't the smell of bleach like her old school. It was fake lemon scent from air fresheners. The hallway was wide and the floor was so shiny she could see her shadow in it. The walls had framed pictures of honor students everywhere. Everything looked fake, like a movie set. Her first teacher, Mrs. Patterson, was thin with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Welcome, Keisha Brown. I hear you're very strong." The way she said strong made it sound like an insult. The class whispered and stared. Keisha walked to the back corner and sat down, eyes on her blank notebook. Around her, whispers cut like knives. "Who's that? I heard she's from the bad part of town." "Bet she causes trouble." She pretended not to hear. The class felt like fog. The teacher's voice was just background noise. Keisha was used to being an outsider, but this felt heavier. By lunchtime, the cafeteria felt like a stage. One group took over the middle tables, laughing loud. Another group whispered about their family vacations. Keisha carried her tray, looking for somewhere to sit. Just as she moved toward a table near the door, a blonde girl rushed past her and took the seat, throwing her a cold look. "No, sorry, no nothing." Keisha kept walking. Finally, she found a single table near the entrance. Quiet. Eating alone felt no different than eating at home. That's when she saw them. 3 girls walked in like they owned the place. Madison Hayes led the way. Perfect blonde hair, designer clothes, smile sharp as a knife but filled with hate. Behind her was Chelsea Miller, tall and thin but with nervous eyes, more of a follower than a leader. The third girl, Amber Ross, kept looking around the room like she was hunting for someone to pick on. When Madison's eyes landed on Keisha, she smirked. Chelsea whispered something that made Amber laugh out loud. Not one of them looked away. Keisha didn't look down. She stared back, face blank, a short silence. Then Madison nodded and pulled her group to the center table. Keisha's breathing stayed calm, but inside she knew this was only the beginning. The next day, it started small. A too-hard shoulder bump from Amber in the hallway. Keisha's pen knocked off her desk by Chelsea on purpose. Giggles from the row behind her. Ghetto. Look at that attitude. Think she's tough. Keisha stayed quiet. Her hands tapped a rhythm under her desk, like she was shadowboxing against the walls she used to practice on back home. She made herself a promise. Don't start trouble. Not again, but her silence only made them bolder. In gym class, Amber ran into her hard during basketball. Keisha almost fell, then stood up slowly. Careful there, Amber mocked. Keisha stared straight into her eyes, voice low and cold. Not funny. Just loud. The court went silent. Chelsea hollered, "Oh!" Madison, watching from the bleachers, raised an eyebrow. Her smile changed from hate to interest. Keisha turned and kept moving, but she knew a line had been crossed. That afternoon, as Keisha closed her locker, Madison stepped up close. Her voice was low but sharp. "You've got quite a mouth." Without looking at her, Keisha answered right away. "And you've got a lot of empty words." Madison laughed, but it sounded fake. "New girl talks big. I wonder how long you can keep that fire." Keisha stopped and for the first time looked Madison straight in the eyes. "Never felt like I belonged here anyway." For 1 second, Madison's smile dropped. But she quickly leaned back and shrugged. "All right then, tough girl. Let's see." Keisha slammed her locker shut. The bell rang loud, answering better than any words could. That night in her small room, Keisha unpacked her bag and arranged her books. But her mind kept replaying Madison's stare. She hadn't just looked at Keisha like she was new, she'd looked at her like someone choosing a target. On Tuesday morning, the sky was dull gray. Fog hung heavy over the bus windows like tiny cracks in glass. Keisha sat in the very back, earbuds hanging but no music playing. She just watched quietly. When the bus stopped in front of Lincoln High, students poured out like a flock of colorful birds. Keisha stepped down and took a deep breath. A new day, but the air felt heavy, like the school itself was holding its breath. The hallway was loud with laughter, slamming lockers and shoes hitting the polished floor. Keisha opened her locker, but instead of her neatly stacked books, paper came spilling out everywhere. Torn notes, crumpled flyers, all scattering at her feet. At first, it seemed like just a prank, but when she bent down to pick them up, Keisha saw the words written on each piece. "Go back." "Nobody wants you here." Her hand closed into a fist. Her heartbeat was slow but heavy. She stuffed everything into her backpack, then closed the locker with a loud thud. Around her, a few students glanced over, then quickly turned away, pretending to be busy. A girl giggled. A boy walked faster. No one stopped. No one spoke. Keisha stood still for a few seconds, breathing deep. She couldn't let them see her break. In class, whispers still followed her. Amber snickered while Chelsea muttered, "Straight out of the hood. Probably can't even afford that laptop." Both of them burst into laughter. The teacher didn't notice, eyes fixed on the board. Keisha kept writing, each letter steady, but her fingers tapped lightly on the desk like fists hitting a punching bag. She remembered training with her older brother. His voice echoed in her head. "Never hit first, but if you have to, make it count." At lunch, Keisha sat alone. Her tray was almost untouched. From the middle table, Madison leaned back, eyes locked on her. Chelsea said something. The whole group burst out laughing. A grape rolled across Keisha's table. Then a crumpled napkin landed near her tray. She didn't flinch. She just pulled out a pen, opened her notebook, and wrote in small, neat lines. 11:38, grape thrown from middle table. 11:40, napkin thrown by Chelsea. Her eyes flicked to the security camera in the corner of the ceiling. She was calculating its angle. She wrote a small note at the bottom. Blind spot. Column blocks view. She didn't look at them. She didn't react. But inside, anger was rising. After school, Keisha waited for the bus under the red brick awning. The wind was cold. A man's voice came from behind. "You doing okay?" She turned. A tall black man in a gray suit stood there, his eyes calm, not judging. Principal Marcus Green. Keisha nodded slightly. "I'm fine." He held her gaze, his voice steady but gentle. "You're not invisible." Keisha raised an eyebrow. I never said I was. He nodded. True, but I've seen that look many times before. The look of someone who knows they can only take so much. She stayed silent. Listen, Green continued. If anything goes too far and you want it on record, come to me. I'll handle it the right way. Keisha tilted her head. And what's the right way? Green looked at her, his lips pressed tight, voice low. The way they'll never expect. The bus pulled up. Keisha stepped on, but her eyes stayed on him. In that man's eyes, she didn't see pity. She saw respect. That night, Keisha's room was dark. She pulled the crumpled papers from her backpack and spread them across the floor, piecing them together. The words, "Go back. Nobody wants you here," stood out clear. She picked up a marker and wrote dates and times in her notebook. A firm line. Day 5. Locker vandalized. Content shows racial bias. Keisha paused and breathed out. She knew the game was no longer small, but this time she wasn't alone. The next morning, the hallway felt heavier. Curious eyes, quiet laughter. Amber nudged Chelsea, pointing toward Keisha. But when Keisha's gaze cut across them, cold and sharp, both girls froze. She turned away and walked into class. Inside her mind, Principal Green's words echoed. The way they'll never expect. Keisha pressed her lips tight. This time she wouldn't just take it. This time she would write down everything. And when the truth came out, no one would be able to deny it. As she sat at her desk, a chill ran down her back. Like an instinct, they were about to make their move, something bigger. And when it happened, all of Lincoln High would have to see it. On Wednesday, the sky hung dull gray. Low clouds pressed heavy. A cold wind slid through the long hallways. Keisha walked through the school gates feeling a thick, strange atmosphere. She couldn't name it, but her gut warned her. They would make their move today. The hallway was jammed with students shuffling between classes. She caught sight of Madison Hayes leaning against lockers, phone in hand. Chelsea and Amber were nearby, whispering with twisted smirks. When Keisha's eyes passed over them, they froze for just 1 second, then burst into mocking laughter. She didn't stop. She only tightened her grip on her backpack and walked faster. That afternoon's art class took place in a bright room with wide windows overlooking the football field. The teacher, Mr. Davis, sat in the corner looking at papers. On the tables, students had spread out supplies, paper, paint, glue, and the blunt metal scissors every art class had. Keisha chose a seat near the window and started sketching random lines. Her breathing stayed steady. Her eyes sometimes drifted outside, avoiding the whispers behind her. Chelsea Miller stood up, pretending to look for a paintbrush. Her hand brushed over a pair of scissors. Her eyes lit up with twisted excitement. Amber nudged her with an elbow, whispering, "Do it." Keisha didn't notice at first. The sound of scissors opening and closing was quiet, swallowed by classroom chatter. Then suddenly, a sharp tug at the back of her head. A loud snip. She froze. Her hand rose slowly. Short pieces, thick chunks of her braid, fell into her palm. For a moment, the class went completely silent. Then laughter exploded. Chelsea raised the cut hair high, shaking it like a trophy. Feeling lighter now, Keisha? Maybe your head was too heavy to think straight. Amber slapped her back, laughing hard. From the middle table, Madison's voice rang out loud enough for everyone to hear. Bold move, Chelsea. But careful, she might start crying now. Some students pulled out their phones, whispers, scattered laughter. Keisha sat perfectly still, hands holding the cut braid, eyes fixed on empty space. For one split second, time stopped. Sound faded. All she heard was the slow, heavy beat of her heart. In her head, her brother's voice returned. Never hit first, but if you have to, end it fast. End it clean. Keisha gently placed the braid on the desk. Her chair scraped against the floor as she stood. The sound cut through the laughter like a knife. Chelsea faltered. Hey, chill. It's just a joke. Keisha turned, eyes cold as ice, voice steady and low. You think cutting someone's hair is just a joke? Amber jumped in, her tone nervous. Come on, everyone knows it's just hair. Madison stayed seated, arms folded, smirk still on her lips. You wear it like armor. People will test it. That's how things work. Keisha stepped forward. Her foot hit the floor, echoing through the now silent room. Chelsea backed up half a step, scissors still in hand. I said, calm down. Don't you? The punch landed like lightning. Keisha's shoulder turned, fist snapping out clean and sharp. The crack of bone against cheek echoed. Chelsea went flying backward, crashing into the table. Paint splashed everywhere. The class screamed. Amber lunged forward, shouting, "You're crazy!" But Keisha slipped left, grabbed her wrist, and twisted hard. A faint crack followed by Amber's scream. She slammed Amber's elbow against the edge of the table. Amber dropped to her knees, holding her arm in pain. Madison rose but didn't move forward. Her hand lifted like she was trying to calm things down. All right, enough, you win. Just let it go. Keisha turned her head, eyes harder than steel. You don't get to decide if I win or lose. In Madison's eyes, for the first time, fear flickered. She stepped back in silence. Around them, a few students had their phones up, recording. Others stood frozen, shocked. Mr. Davis finally snapped out of his shock, shouting into the intercom. Security! We have a situation in the art room! Keisha didn't shake. She wasn't out of breath. She bent down, picked up the braid from the floor, and held it tight in her hand. Then she turned and walked out. The door closed softly behind her. Inside, chaos exploded. Crying, shouting, Mr. Davis calling for help. But in the hallway, Keisha walked steady, her footsteps echoing sharp and cold. She didn't run. She didn't explain. She didn't look back. At the stairwell, 2 security guards rushed toward her, hands out. Stop right there! Keisha stopped. She stood still holding the braid. No resistance, no defense. Her eyes stayed forward, hard as stone. Far down the hall, students gathered, whispering. Someone said out loud, "They cut her hair first." That whisper spread like fire through dry grass. The halls of Lincoln High hung between chaos and dead silence. Whispers ran through groups of students pressed against the walls, eyes fixed on Keisha Brown being walked by 2 security guards. She didn't fight. Her hand still held the cut braid, knuckles slightly scraped from the earlier punch, but her eyes stayed cold and unreadable. One student whispered, "She dropped Chelsea with 1 hit. Unbelievable." Another added, "But they cut her hair first." News spread faster than the bell. Keisha was led straight to the main office. Wood-paneled walls, frosted glass windows. The air inside was quiet, cut off from the storm outside. When the door shut, Principal Marcus Green was already behind his desk. He wore a gray shirt with rolled-up sleeves, tie loose. His eyes weren't angry. They were watching, patient to the point of being intense. He waved to the guards. "She's not going anywhere. Close the door." The click of the lock fell heavy in the air. Green sat quietly for a few seconds, then spoke softly. "Sit down, Brown." Keisha pulled out a chair and sat straight, the braid still in her hand. On the desk was a steaming cup of coffee, a thick folder, and a half-open laptop. Green leaned back, hands together. "I've read the report from Mr. Davis." He paused, letting silence stretch. "You attacked 3 students. 1 has a broken nose. 1 has an injured arm. Is that correct?" Keisha didn't bow her head. She answered plain. "They cut my hair." Green didn't look surprised. He nodded slightly like he'd already guessed that. "I reviewed the hallway cameras." "You didn't run. You didn't fight the guards. You stood waiting at the stairs." Keisha's eyes flickered. She hadn't expected him to notice that detail. Green put his hands on the desk, leaning forward. His voice was slow, deep, heavy. "Brown, people will hear another story out there. They'll say a black girl attacked 3 white girls. They'll use words like violent, dangerous, out of control. You know that." Keisha's lips twisted bitterly. "I know. It's always like that." A long silence followed. Green stared at her, then sighed, not from being tired, but like he was weighing a choice. "Tell me," he asked. "Why didn't you walk away this time? Why not ignore it like before?" Keisha gripped the braid tighter and lifted it for him to see. The strands were uneven, jagged where they'd been cut. Her voice came low, rough from holding back emotion. Because I've walked away hundreds of times. I stayed silent when they shoved me. I stayed silent when they called me names, when they laughed, when they knocked my stuff over. I let it all slide. She stopped, eyes burning but without tears. But today they took this. The braid dropped onto the desk. It's not just hair. It's part of me. Something I made, cared for, kept. A symbol. And they ripped it off and laughed. Green stayed quiet. He didn't nod like he was trying to comfort her. He let the weight of her words sit between them. At last, he spoke slowly. My grandmother used to braid my sister's hair every Sunday morning. She called it a crown. She said the world will try to tear it from your head with rules, with stares, with silence. But if you see it as a crown, no one can take it unless you fight back. Keisha sat still. Her shoulders dropped slightly. Tension eased just a little. I have to suspend you for 3 days, Green said, voice now formal. Keisha nodded. I figured. But, he continued, I won't let them expel you. And when those girls' parents raise hell, I'll demand the classroom footage. I'll write my own report. Keisha blinked, not in shock, but in disbelief. Why? Green leaned back, arms crossed, eyes like steel. Because I've spent my whole life walking the line between doing the job they want and the job that needs to be done. Today I've decided those two can be the same. He pulled open a drawer, took out a large envelope, and slid it toward her. This is your suspension notice. Sign it, then go home. But remember, this isn't over. Keisha signed slowly. The braid stayed on the desk between her and Green. When she stood, he spoke softly. You fought alone since your first day here. Now you don't have to anymore. She looked at him. For the first time, her gaze softened just a little. She nodded faintly. Yes, sir. Green gave a slight nod. Go rest. But no, this is just the beginning. When Keisha left the office, students were still in the hall. Their eyes followed her. Some looked away. Some stared with curiosity, even fear. A girl whispered, She's suspended. A boy replied, No. I heard the principal's keeping the footage. Rumors spread fast. And for the first time, the silence around Keisha wasn't abandonment. It was waiting. The next morning, Lincoln High's parking lot was packed. Black SUVs, silver luxury cars, shiny white sedans lined up perfectly. These weren't teachers' cars. They belonged to wealthy parents, people who thought their money ran the school. Inside the main office, the air was thick. The meeting room door opened, and one by one they walked in. Perfect suits, expensive coats over shoulders, watches shining under the lights. They said little, but their eyes made threats. Principal Marcus Green stood at the head of the table, not sitting. A cup of coffee sat on the side, untouched. He knew in a few minutes he'd face a storm. A big man in a beige coat stepped forward, Mr. Hayes, Madison's father. His voice boomed, anger sharp as a blade. My daughter came home terrified. How do you explain why this girl hasn't been expelled yet? Beside him, a blonde woman with a pearl necklace crossed her arms, lips pressed tight. Her voice cut like glass. This wasn't a fight. This was assault. Violence that can't be tolerated. Green nodded slightly, not backing down. Keisha Brown has been suspended for 3 days. That is the official action per policy. Another man slammed his palm on the table. 3 days? While my daughter had to get her arm x-rayed? And you call that justice? Green stood tall, eyes like blades. And what do you call justice when 3 girls used scissors to cut another girl's hair in the middle of class, mocking her and filming it? That's not a prank. That's humiliation. That's violence. The room stirred. Some parents exchanged uneasy looks, caught off guard by his directness. The woman with pearls snapped back, voice sharp. Don't make this a race issue. Our girls were just fooling around. It was that girl who answered with her fists. Green lowered his tone, slow and firm. Fooling around? That was her body. Her identity. Her dignity. When your daughters cut her hair, they crossed the line. and she had the right to respond. Another father in a gray suit, face red, stepped forward. "We've supported this school for years." I sit on the board. "I funded the athletic wing. And now you stand with some new kid from a poor neighborhood?" Green met his eyes, unwavering. "I don't stand with anyone. I stand with the truth." The air froze. "The truth," he continued, voice sinking low, "is that your daughter started it, humiliated her, and it was caught on the classroom camera. That footage is in my possession and has been sent to the district." Shock ran through the room. Parents whispered in alarm. One parent hissed, "You wouldn't dare! You'd destroy these children's reputations over a petty fight." Green gave a faint smile, eyes steady. "I already sent it. The district is reviewing. If you want to call it petty, go ahead. But when the footage goes public, people will decide." Heavy silence dropped. Mothers in the back gripped their bags tighter, faces twisted between anger and fear. Mr. Hayes spoke again, voice lower, calculating. "Mr. Green, think carefully. Do you know what you're risking? Your job, your reputation, your entire career. The board can replace you any time." Green crossed his arms, calm as stone. "If I lose my job for protecting my students, that's a price I'll pay. And if you plan to threaten me, think again. Because this time I have evidence, and this time you can't buy silence." The tension was crushing. Parents glanced at each other, anger flashing but powerless. They were used to winning with money and influence. But today they hit a wall. The blonde woman shot to her feet, voice icy. "You've just made the biggest mistake of your life." Green tilted his head slightly, voice calm. "No, ma'am. I just did the right thing." The door slammed behind them. What stayed in the room was heavy silence, broken only by Green's steady breathing. He knew the storm wasn't over, but at least this time, he wasn't alone. Out in the hallway beyond the meeting room, word began to spread. Principal Green defended Keisha. The parents stormed out angry. Students whispered, eyes fixed on the office where big decisions were being made. And somewhere in the shadows, even without being there, Keisha Brown could feel it. A bigger battle had just started. The 3 days of suspension dragged by heavy as lead. Keisha spent most of the time at home, avoiding her mother's worried looks. In her small room, she sat in front of the mirror, fingers brushing over the patch of hair that had been cut. The hurt wasn't physical, it was the shame. But it didn't break her. It turned into something else. Strength. On the 4th day, she threw her backpack over her shoulder and returned to Lincoln High. The black iron gates stood tall ahead. Students poured in as usual, but the feeling was different. Whispers spread quick. Eyes turned toward her. Some looked curious, careful. A few snickered quietly, but went silent when they caught her sharp stare. But there were other looks, too. Respect, recognition, out in the open. Keisha walked, back straight, steps steady. Her footsteps hit the floor like they already belonged. In class, teachers avoided calling on her. Eyes slid away, polite nods, forced and stiff. No one mentioned what happened in the art room, but the silence felt heavier than gossip. At lunch, Keisha again chose her usual seat near the window. This time she didn't lower her head. As she sat, she noticed a few students at another table glance her way, exchange looks, then give her small nods. Small, but enough for her to know the silence was starting to crack. That afternoon, a small note reached her through an office helper. "Principal Green wants to see you after school." When Keisha walked in, Green stood by a bookshelf holding a thick file. He pointed for her to sit, then placed the file in front of her. "This is what I've gathered." Keisha opened it. Inside were printed emails, ignored reports, lists of black students punished for disorderly conduct or aggressive language. But serious incidents involving Madison's group had vanished from records. She turned a page and found a handwritten note from Green himself. Pattern repeating. Systemic bias. Keisha looked up, voice quiet. "You've been tracking this before me." Green nodded slowly. "Not just you. Many others. But most stayed silent or left. This time I won't let it get buried. He set a worn notebook on the desk, pages filled with names, dates, incidents, even signatures from the few teachers brave enough to report. I want you to write too. Every detail, every time they provoke, every word, every act. The more exact, the harder it is to deny. Keisha gave a bitter half-smile. You're turning me into the main witness. No, Green replied firmly. I'm turning you into evidence, something they can't erase. In the weeks that followed, Keisha watched quietly. In class, Amber returned quieter. Chelsea avoided her eyes, face still bruised. Madison sat apart, pretending everything was normal, but Keisha noticed the nervousness in every move. They no longer mocked her openly. Instead came quieter tactics. Anonymous notes slipped into the class box. Whispers about the violent girl. Accidental bumps in the hall. Keisha didn't lash out. She opened her notebook and recorded. Dates, times, descriptions. Each line was another brick in the wall Green was building. One afternoon, Green called her in again. He handed her an envelope. Someone sent this to me, anonymous. Keisha opened it. Inside were printed emails between teachers. The words were vague, but the message was clear. These kids come from undisciplined families. Only strict punishment will keep them in line. After reading, Keisha pressed her lips tight. They're building a case against me. Green's eyes hardened, and he nodded. Not just you. They want to stamp out anyone like you, but will turn their own evidence against them. He leaned back, arms folded. This battle isn't just in the classroom anymore, Brown. It's on paper. And on paper, we'll win. In the days ahead, the school atmosphere shifted more. Students whispered about Green holding files. Some younger teachers, especially Ms. Rivera from English, looked at Keisha differently, worried but quietly supportive. In the hallway, a black janitor named Marcus stopped Keisha. I saw it all that day. I was right there fixing lights. If anyone asks, I'll speak. Keisha stared, slightly stunned. This was a piece she hadn't expected. By the weekend, news began leaking outside. A young reporter, Sophia Martinez, emailed Green asking for an interview. He didn't agree yet, but Keisha knew the story was no longer stuck inside Lincoln's four walls. It was spreading. On her way home, Keisha passed through the courtyard. The final bell echoed. She spotted a group of younger students whispering. A small girl was being blocked by a bigger one. For a moment, Keisha wanted to step in, but she held back. She pulled out her notebook and wrote, 2:07 p.m., female student blocked. No one helped. She closed the notebook and took a deep breath. The anger in her chest hadn't gone away, but now it had purpose. Keisha knew the real battle had just begun. They didn't just want to embarrass her in class. They wanted to erase her from the system. But Green had shown her the path. Turn every act into proof, and this time Keisha wouldn't run. She would remember. She would stand. She would turn her silence into something no one could deny.